City Hall. My name is Matt O'Malley. I am the District 6 City Councilor as well as the Chair of the Committee on on the Environment, Sustainability and Parks. That's easy for me to say. I'm joined by my colleague and friend, at-large City Councilor Althea Garrison, who is the lead sponsor of Docket 0582, an order hearing regarding unreasonable and excessive noise levels in the City of Boston. We have, for those who are viewing this or in the chamber with us, this is a public hearing that is being recorded, broadcast on Comcast 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964, as well as being streamed at cityofboston.gov or boston.gov/citycounciltv. I ask you all to please silence your cell phones. That's particularly important at a hearing on noise levels. And we will be taking public testimony for as many people who would like to join us. I have a preliminary sheet with just one person signing up so far, so if anyone else would like to sign up, please, there's another sheet there you may sign. We'll get to you. I do have several letters of testimony of individuals who are unable to join us. I won't read them in their entirety, but suffice it to say the first is from Melissa Vining of Jamaica Plain, who writes about excessive noise levels during special events. The second letter is from Dolores Bogdanian of Park Drive in Boston. Dolores writes to express her sincere and empathetic concern about level of noise in our city, and grateful for this. And she's talking specifically about her experience in Audubon Circle in the Fenway section of Boston. The next is a letter from Martin Roter, who writes about Martin's experience in the Back Bay from the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay, NAB, and sort of illustrates a number of issues around vehicles, construction, digging, and the new trash pickup schedule. There's also some testimony from Catherine Greeno, who lives on Beacon Street in Boston, who thanks us for convening this hearing and talks specifically again about Audubon Circle, so it's another person. So that's that. All of this public testimony will, of course, be listed into the city record with Ron Cobb, our liaison, who will compile a committee report, as this is the case after a city council committee. Before we get to Carl Spector, the Commissioner on the Environment, I'd like to invite the lead author and the sponsor of this, Councilor at Large Althea Garrison, for an opening statement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I found this order for a hearing regarding unreasonable and excessive noise levels in the City of Boston, as it regards all kinds of noise, including loud construction work and blaring music and sounds from parties, festivals, and city-permitted and non-permitted events and gathering. When attending public meetings throughout the City of Boston, I hear numerous complaints from residents about unreasonable and excessive noise. I would have found this as an audience to perhaps amend the Boston Municipal Code standard for noise in the city, but I thought that it would be more appropriate to file an order for a hearing to collaborate with our panelists and general public to find the best way forward on this important issue, which is why we are here today. Studies have shown that unreasonable and excessive noise is substantial danger to the health, welfare, safety, and quality of life of the public. And this kind of noise over an extended period of time can lead to hearing loss, disrupt personal communication, cause a sleep disturbance, and create anxiety among residents. As elected officials of the City of Boston, we have an obligation to protect the public health, safety, and peace and quiet of our residents. And so I look forward to this conversation today to find real ways to reduce unreasonable and excessive noise levels in our city, and to work for safer and more reasonable levels throughout Boston. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Garrison. I neglected when I was reading some of the earlier statements that came in. There's also a communication from the Downtown Boston Business Improvement District, the BID, which thanks you, Councilor Garrison, and the committee for holding this hearing, and looks forward to partnering with the Council, Air Pollution Control Commission, and others to work for more safe and reasonable noise levels in Boston. So that, of course, from the downtown bid will be added to our file as well. Commissioner Spector, welcome. No stranger to this chamber. Did you have any opening comments or thoughts as we discuss this issue?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a pleasure to be here. As you said, I'm Carl Spector, Commissioner of the Environment, and the Environment Department does include the Air Pollution Control Commission, which we'll talk about. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss with you today the topic of noise in Boston. The city can be a noisy place. Walt Whitman described it 150 years ago. The blab of the pave, tires of carts, slough of boot soles, talk of the promenaders, the heavy omnibus, the clank of the shod horses, the snow sleighs clinking, shouted jokes, pelts of snowballs, the hurrahs for popular favorites, the fury of roused mobs, the impassive stones that receive and return so many echoes. This noise reflects the density of people and activity, our drive to build and create, the clamor for attention, the urge to share and inform and entertain. It now, too, reflects the technologies we have to hand and the energy we have at our fingertips, engines, jackhammers, and amplifiers. And as you have pointed out, it can be excessive, making our days and nights uncomfortable or harming our health. For this reason, the City of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have enacted laws and regulations to restrict noise. In Boston, there are two overall sources of authority. The City Ordinance on Unreasonable Noise, Boston Municipal Code 16-26, and the regulations for the control of noise of the Air Pollution Control Commission. The APCC regulations are in turn derived from state authorities. Several city agencies have responsibility for enforcing the various restrictions. For example, the Boston Police Department deals with excessive noise from motor vehicles or from loud parties and other behavior that are described as disturbing the peace. The Inspectional Services Department enforces the city's provisions regarding construction hours. The Air Pollution Control Commission takes the lead where there is excessive noise from permanent equipment such as condensers, fans, and other types of heating, cooling, and ventilation equipment. Every year, the Environment Department receives about 400 complaints of excessive noise from all neighborhoods directed at a wide variety of sources. Our first goal is to work with the complainant and with the generator of the noise to understand the problem and to assist them in finding solutions, whether they be technical or behavioral. Occasionally, legal action is necessary. There are some sources of noise over which the city has no jurisdiction. For example, as you know, some Boston residents are very concerned about airplane noise. This is entirely within the purview of the Federal Aviation Administration and Massport. The city, through its participation on the Massport Advisory Committee and other means, makes sure that those authorities are aware of and responding to complaints, but cannot take any direct action itself. The level of noise in Boston is an important component of the quality of life in the city. I greatly appreciate your convening this hearing to discuss this important topic, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Commissioner. And any testimony that begins with a Walt Whitman quote is okay in my book. So Chief Cook's going to have to up his game next time he comes here with thorough or better. And I'll make sure, I'm sure he's watching this.
Well, I will let him know myself.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, but I'll let the lead sponsor begin. Councilor Garrison.
Commissioner Spector, you work closely with the Air Pollution Control Commissioner. So can you say a little bit more about the Environment Department and the commission are doing to, and what the commissions are doing to regulate unreasonable and excessive noise levels in the city of Boston?
Certainly. So as we've discussed, the Air Pollution Control Commission has its home in the Environment Department. The commission itself has 5 members, 2 ex officio, one from the Transportation Department and one from the Public Health Commission, and 3 members appointed by the mayor. I'd have to check the date, but about 30 years ago, don't hold me to that number exactly, the commission did pass the existing regulations for the control of noise in Boston. We generally, as I said, these regulations are mostly concerned with permanent equipment like HVAC equipment. we have one staff person in the Environment Department whose primary responsibility is to respond to complaints. And as I said, we get about 400 complaints a year. Our first approach to that is to work with the people, again, as I said, to understand the complaint, to make sure that people are against whom the complaint is directed are aware of the regulations, both ours and other regulations that may apply, and then to assist them in finding solutions. In most cases, we are able to resolve the problem amicably. Sometimes it takes, a bit of time, but that's what we do, in guiding people to, often it's to maintain their equipment sometimes if it's old equipment. Sometimes if it's new equipment, they'll need to, that's in a location that is not good for noise, to find ways to shield it or take other measures to reduce its impact on the people around them. Occasionally, we do have to resort to legal action. We work with the law department to bring a complaint in municipal court and go from there, and usually to get injunctive relief. That's exceptional. Most of the time, we're able to resolve the problem by working with the people involved.
Good, take your time.
When a noise complaint is made, do you hear about and document that formal complaint, or is that just processed through the Boston Police Department alone?
No. There are, as I mentioned, certain categories of complaint that go to the police department. As I said, disturbing the police, disturbing the peace, or things related to motor vehicles, and the police, I presume, document the complaints that go to them. The complaints that come to us, we maintain a database and a record of all the complaints that we get, and how we resolve them.
Thank you, Councilor Garrison. Obviously, this is a quality of life issue that we deal with constantly. Airplane noise, as you brought up, is something we get a lot, particularly in Southwest Boston, and I know parts of Dorchester. I know Congressman Lynch and Congresswoman Presley have been working on this because, as you correctly stated, it's an FAA oversight. People hear a loud party. Should they call 311? I know a couple years ago, the police departments used to have a dedicated party line. Do they still do that, or what would you say to those watching at home?
I would say call 311.
Yeah, okay. Motorbikes we dealt with a lot. I used to live on the Jamaica Way, and you would hear that, particularly this time of year. Now, I know our police department has a no-chase policy, which I think is smart and prudent and safe for all parties involved, but I know that talking to Captain Jack Dinalecki, they've worked on a lot of the chop shops where they build these illegal motorbikes. And then construction, we still get a lot of construction calls. What's the guidelines for when construction can start on a weekday or a weekend?
Yes, the start time for construction is 7 a.m. on weekdays and goes to 6 p.m. If people think there are violations of that, they should call 311, and complaints are directed to the Inspectional Services Department, which is responsible for that.
Sure.
There are times when construction can take place outside of those hours, but the construction firm should be getting permission from ISD to do that. Like I said, and if there are any complaints, those should go to 311.
That's right. And just to know, I've often, when we get these types of calls, not too long ago, had an issue with a neighbor. It was well after 10 o'clock, almost approaching 11 o'clock at night, doing construction, very, very loud, and I knocked on the door, had the conversation, and sort of diffused it that way. He was very apologetic, and it was sort of a nice way. So I always encourage constituents when they call to try talking to their neighbors first, but should they feel uncomfortable about doing that or not get the positive response that I did, then of course they should call 311, and there are always ISD inspectors on site. So
right, and for just the reason that you mentioned, we also we often ask our colleagues in the Office of Neighborhood Services and, the neighborhood coordinators to get involved, because they'll often know the people or the companies that are involved, and can we address this amicably and just figure out how we can all work together in this crowded city. Now, on the other hand, sometimes there are real violations, and that's why we have our noise meters and our numerical standards that we can apply.
No, that's right. And I appreciate Councilor Garrison for bringing this up, because it is an important topic. So I saw she was in and out. I don't know if she's coming back, but Councilor at-large Anissa Sabi George was here. We'll see if she has a statement or questions later. That's all I have for Commissioner Spector, are you good? No. As the author as well. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Free to go. And I'd like to invite Erica Walker, who's with the Community Noise Lab at Boston University, to join us. If you want to take the seat Carl is at, we'll get to work. And then after Erica, we will begin public testimony. So if any individuals would like to speak, happy to hear you. Just please sign up in the back left corner. Welcome, Ms. Walker. Thank you for coming. Did you have an opening statement to begin?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you for inviting me. I saw your article in the Boston Herald, and I reached out to your office, and I was like, yes, whenever you do something, I would like to be here. My name is Erica Walker, and I have a doctorate degree in environmental health from the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. And as my time there, I have worked and established Noise in the City, which is a nonprofit organization that measured sound levels in the city of Boston. So in that aim, I measured sound levels at 400 sites in the city of Boston. I developed and deployed the Greater Boston Neighborhood Noise Survey, and we saw 1,200 responses to that survey. I also released all of the findings from both my sound measurements and the survey on an online report. It's available at boston.noiseinthecity.org, so you can see all of that analysis, ranging from the data from the 400 sites that I collected sound levels at to the survey data, and I also analyzed noise complaint data from the police department. And then with that, at the beginning of the end of that, I also developed and released an app called Noise Score, and Noise Score is currently still available. It allows citizens in the city of Boston and all over the world to document their noise complaints, so they not only can measure the sound levels, they can also talk a little bit about the way it makes them feel. I've since graduated from Harvard, and now I'm at Boston University, where I've founded the Community Noise Lab. The Community Noise Lab is a little bit different than Noise in the City. Noise in the City was sort of kind of trying to understand how loud the city of Boston is in the greater Boston community. But at the Community Noise Lab, we're working with specific communities to address very specific noise issues. So within the city of Boston, I'm working with 3 communities. I'm working with Mission Hill, and they're very concerned about sound levels emanating from the Longwood Medical Area. They're also very concerned about sound levels from construction, and they're also very concerned about sound levels from loud parties. I'm also working with East Boston. As you can suggest, East Boston is right next to the airport, so they're concerned about sound levels from the airport. And I'm also working with Fenway. They're very concerned about construction and also concerts, summer concerts from Live Nation concerts in the Fenway Park. And then I'm also working with a bunch of other communities, Andover, Milton, Winthrop, and the city of Chelsea. So I'm working with these communities, and I'm doing a bunch of different things. The first thing is taking real-time sound level measurements. One of my hypotheses in measuring sound levels in the city is that we do a very superficial job. We measure how loud it is, but sound level is much more complex. Not only is it how loud it is, it's also what we call the frequency or the character. So I always use this as an example. If you're standing at a bus stop and you're waiting for the bus to pull in and you hear the bus pull on the brakes and it makes that squeaky sound, you can put your fingers in your ear and you can mitigate the squeaky sound. But you can also feel the rumbling of the sound in your chest. And I'm very concerned about high levels of that low rumbling in your chest, which we call sounds across the frequency spectrum. So in particular, I'm interested in measuring not only how loud sounds are, but also the frequency composition. And then also, too, our perception of sound. I feel like Sound is one thing, it's a physical characteristic of our environment, but noise is the part that's unwanted. So I'm definitely interested in understanding how residents perceive sound, because I feel like it's very important to understand perception if we're dealing with health impacts in particular. So I'm measuring sound levels, and right now we have a bunch of sound monitors out in the Fenway measuring sounds from the concerts that are going to be upcoming on Saturday. But I also encourage citizens to download and use the Noise Score app. It will allow them to themselves measure sound levels, tell us a little bit about how it feels, and that data is fed into a live map that you can see the responses in real time. And then we're also doing a laboratory-based experiment where we're taking sounds from the city of Boston, and we are exposing participants to these sound levels, and we're monitoring their cardiovascular stress and mental responses with hopes of seeing how sounds in a typical urban environment impact our health acutely. And then we're also doing a bunch of community engagement events ranging from hearing screenings to sound walks to lectures. So that's what I'm doing currently. But the question is, why am I interested in all of this? I'm interested in noise because of a personal experience. I was one of those people living in an apartment. Above me were neighbors who had 2 small kids that ran the length of that apartment, which was my home, throughout the day. I tried the regular chain of events of complaining and documenting, but really I was not able to receive any relief. So that sort of inspired this whole kind of noise advocacy. But I'm just, like I said, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited about having not only a conversation today, but conversations in the future about how we can deal with these noise issues.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I appreciate your opening statement. Councilor Garrison?
Can you tell us how exactly you use sound monitors to measure sound levels?
Yes.
Throughout the city of Boston, and what does that data tell us?
Yes. So I'm going to answer this question in 2 specific ways because I've done it in 2 different capacities. When I measured at the 400 sites in Boston, I took 400 short-term samples, not only using the commonly reported sound level metric, the A-weighted decibel, but also looking at sound across the octave band to kind of get a representation of the frequency of noise, so the rumblings to the high-pitched sounds. So these were very short-term measurements at about 10 minutes per site. And that data showed a bunch of different things. Like I said, the report is available online, but just to give you a summary, sound levels in the city of Boston, when we're using the typically reported A-weighted decibel, are in excess of standards recommended by the WHO. So WHO, the World Health Organization, has guidelines for sound levels for different types of sources, but then also for different times of the day. So sound levels in Boston clock in at about 65 to 68 decibels during the daytime, and they fall to about 55 to 60 decibels at night. That data is based on the 400 sites that I measured at previously. Now, the data that we're measuring now is a little more targeted, so we're not doing it holistically in the city of Boston. We're doing it around specific noise issues, so Fenway Park and concerts and Mission Hill and construction, and that can get extremely excessive. I've seen sound levels around concerts over 95 decibels, which is about the sound level of an airplane taken off at an airport. But again, those are more targeted around a specific issue, so they may be extremes. We are in the process of analyzing that data. We've analyzed the data for outside of the city of Boston, but we are going to be releasing a report soon for Fenway's results. So I'll be able to have more concrete evidence, more concrete data, but that's what I know so far. So this is a study in progress.
With your research and expertise, what do you think we as elected officials can do to shape and reform our policies on the city level to reduce unreasonable and excessive noise levels?
I think the first thing is a change in attitude, not just feeling like sound levels and noise complaints is just a first world problem. I think being open to listening to people when they complain and not looking at it as just something that people with a lot of privilege are complaining about. It's a real environmental health issue that is backed up by millions of epidemiological studies. So taking it seriously. And the second thing, being a little creative. using the tools that are currently available, using my resources. Our Community Noise Lab is an independent research organization. We don't have any agendas or vested interests other than getting at the truth, encouraging people to use some of the tools that I've developed, like the Noise Score app, publicizing any of the data that you've collected so far. I know that we have a commitment to making sure that all of our data is freely available, without names and things like that, but publicizing the data that you do have and not being afraid to have these kind of conversations and keeping the process of enforcement and measurement pretty open. It seems kind of nebulous sometimes when we're trying to find out exact sound levels and things like that, but being clear, being precise, and keeping the channels open and honest. And one more thing, I think we could do better with measuring sound levels. So typically now we're only measuring how loud it is, but also developing metrics that take into consideration things like a sound's frequency spectrum and also health, like community noise perception. People's feelings about noise are also very important in understanding how much we ingest of the sounds in our community.
Thank you, Councilor Garrison. So you said during the day, the typical decibel level is about 65 to 80, and then at night, 35 to 50? I was just writing fast.
Okay.
Maybe I didn't have those correctly.
That's close, yes.
Okay. And then is that comparable for similar sized cities? Is Boston better or worse in terms of those levels, or higher, lower, I guess I should say?
Okay, I don't accept, it's kind of hard to answer that question. Sure. I would rather compare it to studies that show health impacts, because I don't want us to get into a
fair enough.
peeing contest about who has the loudest sound levels.
Fair enough, Doctor. Please.
But I do think that the sound levels that are experienced in Boston and other places, to be legit. I've experienced louder sound levels in India.
Sure.
But comparing the sound levels that are in Boston to epidemiological studies, at 40 decibels, we begin to see mood disruption. So 40 decibels would be about the sound of this room if I wasn't talking. We begin to see humans feel disruption in their mood, annoyance. As we move up the decibel spectrum, we begin to see disruption of sleep. So at about 55 decibels, we're disrupting sleep. 65 decibels, which is about how loud Boston is in a typical day, and sometimes at night as well, especially when there's construction. We begin to see things like cardiovascular-related issues such as hypertension, increased risk for heart attacks, increased risk for cardiovascular-related emergency admissions, and then cardiovascular-related mortality. So for me, I think the better comparison would be to compare it to what studies have shown to be impacting our health. And if we compare it to that, I would say that the sound levels in the city of Boston are concerning.
Okay, fair point. And I guess it's not so much a comparison with another city, but of ourselves. I would imagine the answer would be yes, but you will correct me if I'm wrong. Have things gotten better now than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago?
I can't answer that question. It's one of the questions that I would really like to answer because we've just started collecting data. I can say that things have gotten slightly worse than when I collected data back in 2015, but I think that the answer to that question will come with us beginning to measure sound levels and then compare the changes over a period of time. Mm-hmm. We just don't have the network to answer that concretely. You can ask people about their perception. People would say that either it has or it hasn't. Yeah. But I think this is an opportunity for us to begin to answer those kinds of questions. Yeah, no, I like you appreciate data-driven policies, and certainly anecdotally, a car is a lot quieter now than it was in 1975, particularly if you drive an electric car, as I do. But certainly there are other things, and the construction boom is quite influential to this conversation. Right. I do appreciate, and I think the city does a good job
regulating those hours of operations. But as the commissioner said, there are sometimes exceptions to the rule, as with everything. So
Yes.
that is all I have for you, Dr. Walker. I appreciate it. Did you have any other closing
I do.
statements?
I do.
Please, yeah.
I just really appreciate this meeting, and I feel like Boston can be at the forefront of dealing with environmental noise issues. I feel like I would encourage you to utilize my resources and the resources. There's tons of people in this city that that can handle these acoustical questions, but I feel like we should take a risk and begin to be more creative about how we address these things and how we provide data to our residents, how we collect data. So I just feel like this is the beginning of a conversation that could model and shape the way other cities in the United States and across the world handle noise issues. So I think we're at the forefront. I don't think we're behind. We're right on time.
Good. Excellent. That's a good
Thank
note
you.
to end on, a hopeful note to end on. Thank you, Dr. Walker. I just have one person who has signed up, no stranger to this chamber, Victor Brogna from the NEWRA. Mr. Brogna, you can either stand at the podium or have a seat if you want, whatever you are more comfortable with. We typically have public testimony about 2 or 3 minutes, but since you're the only one, I'll give you as long as you want.
I guess I'll stand up because that way I may not speak so long.
There you go. Let me just make sure the mic,
Is it on?
I think,
Hello, hello, hello? No? It doesn't sound to me. Now it is.
Hey,
Now it
hey.
is. Sure. Okay. First, I am delighted to be here because I have complaints that I keep to myself, and now I can let them out. But before starting with the complaints, I want to say that I have something for the committee, and that is I had come across Dr. Walker's work. It was written up in Harvard Magazine a year ago in a lengthy article, and since I didn't know whether she was going to be here, I had hoped that she would be here. I photoed the article, and I have copies for all the members of the committee, which I would
our
like.
city messenger, Ron Cobb, will collect those, and we'll make sure we get them to Councilor Garrison and my colleagues. Thank you.
I can't say how the sound was in Walt Whitman's era, but in my era, it was less than it is now. I've been a North End resident for 26 years and a Boston resident for about 70 years. And what I see is a cultural change, that is amplification has become louder and louder, and the loudness has become more standard. A couple of examples. Not this summer, but the summer before, I was about to listening to a Tanglewood concert of the BSO during the summer, and the sound from a concert on the Greenway in front of Rose Wharf was, I live in the Mercantile Building facing Christopher Columbus Park. The sound from a concert going on at in the Greenway at Rose Wharf was louder than what I could tolerate trying to listen to the BSO on the radio. The only phone number I had was Jesse Brackenbury, the director of the Greenway, and I left a message for him. I'm happy to say that this summer the concert was held in Dewey Square at South Station, which, and I didn't hear, it didn't interfere with the BSO. Concerts on City Hall Plaza. I live in the North End, as I said, and frequently the weekend concerts that are held out here can be heard halfway down Hanover Street. That must be a quarter of a mile, perhaps more, I'm not sure. At least at least halfway down Hanover Street. And I find this certainly annoying, but another issue besides concerts and special events is street performers. Anyone who walks from City Hall from the first floor across Faneuil Hall has undoubtedly heard the acrobats or dancers, whatever they call themselves, who are at the corner of Congress Street and North Street. Their amplification, I can hear, well, on State Street, probably a quarter of a mile away. This is a quality of life issue, but I don't know whether that's pressing enough to cause a major correction. I would like to see the focus on the public health issue, and maybe that can bring us to a cultural change. I don't want to sound like an old crank, but those who claim to be resurrecting the jazz of the 50s, in the 50s, because I remember that, amplification was not used. The clubs on Huntington Avenue did not use amplifiers in their performances. The vocalist would perhaps have a microphone, but no one else. Today, often the percussion section has a microphone. I don't think I can do anything about that except complain, which is why I suggest that the focus should be on the public health, the results to public health, and perhaps with that we can bring noise back into a reasonable level. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Appreciate your testimony. I do not have anyone else who's signed up for public testimony. There are some other members of the public here. If you would like to testify, speak now or forever hold your peace. Oh, Mr. Owens.
Hello. Good afternoon. Glad to be here, an opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Roy Owens. I'm also president of Save the Children Ministries, and I do have some complaints from members in the area around, a couple of blocks left or right of our church where we are. West Cottage, I think during the summertime it's been very loud during the summer. Like when you're several blocks away, you can hear music during that, the weekends. Also, during the, like now September is starting for the college students are returning, and there's a lot of partying on Woodville Street and West Cottage in the next, like goes all night long. So I have a problem with that. Also on Holborn Street, there's like weekend go on, and you can hear it for blocks. So the concern was like, the people who live there, like, how do I call and make a complaint? And I don't want to get some retribution back from the people that I'm complaining about. So and then I heard that Dr. Walker was saying there's somewhere you can download some system program. I would like to get that information from her. So she said you can just download it, and I guess you could feed it in, and then I don't know how you would deal with that, but I mean, so I was wondering, listening to her, if y'all have that information, or she had information, so we could download it to just let you know that, like, the noise is like when it's several blocks away, and I don't know if there's a measurement. It says, like, how far away are you measuring the distance from? Okay, she said it is, and I was concerned about that because it's like when you're several blocks away, and it's just like it's inside of your house. And so I was wondering about that. Those are just a couple of issues that I was concerned about, and I didn't know if y'all had any solutions to deal with those issues. So that's why I came today to ask you if you would. And it's very, it's very hard. Even where I live, it's when the students come back, it's like all night partying, and it's getting to be more of a pervasive problem. And I haven't complained. We couldn't sleep. So it's like, what do? If you're complaining, you're next door. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the issue. So this really a lot. It's like she said, it's getting worse. And I think she knows what I'm saying. How do you complain when it's your next door? And you have to call the police, and the police say, oh, it's your next door neighbor. You see what I'm saying? And then it's like it's worse. Or you're getting your tires slashed, or your windows broke, or something like that. And it's like now people don't seem to have feelings, and they just get anger from when you're shutting down their parties. And that's one of the greatest problems. All right, so I thank you all for the opportunity to speak for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, this is the final call. If anyone would like to testify, seeing and hearing none, Councilor Garrison, do you give any closing statements?
Yes.
Please.
I would like to thank Councilor O'Malley as the chair of the Committee on Environment, Sustainability, and Parks, as well as panelists Mr. Carl Spector and Ms. Erica Walker for the conversation at the hearing today. Since I sponsored this order for a hearing at the end of March, I have heard from many residents from across the city of Boston who have offered their support for what I found and who spoke about the concerns about unreasonable and excessive noise levels in our city. As we become more and more overdeveloped and do not adequately regulate these ever-increasing noise levels, air pollution has become a public safety hazard that should alarm all of us. We can do better, and my sincere hope is that this hearing today will lead to real solutions and will change how we handle the cases of excessive noise. As an at-large city council, I will continue to be an advocate for all residents who, like me, are concerned about unreasonable noise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Garrison. Thank you for introducing this hearing order. Thank you to our panelists, Commissioner Spector, Dr. Walker, and those from the public who offered testimony as well. On behalf of the Committee on Environment, Sustainability, and Parks, we hereby adjourn docket number 0582.